them. This was in between a couple of lectures. This was at university, and we were having a tutorial, and then there was a couple of hours break, and the student, who was a friend called Emma, had said that, was there anybody who would like to go to McDonald's? And I, rather partial to McDonald's. Do you know McDonald's is almost the same in every country? That's exciting, except in France they don't have, they sell wine with their salads, yeah. And in Switzerland, like in Zurich, you're not allowed to have breakfast before 9:30. McDonald's breakfast, you can have Gipfeli and coffee, that's like croissants, yeah? You can have that before 9:30. I just thought I'd tell you this in case you thought you might go to Zurich tomorrow or something. So I was expecting to have this breakfast and this time at McDonald's, and we did go for the first week. In fact, the first couple of Tuesdays we went. The third Tuesday came round, and she wasn't able to go. She said, "I can't go, Wendy. I've got Susie's birthday. I've got to go to the post office, buy her a card, and a few other things I've got to do." And I remember thinking, friends, who needs them? You know, just when you start to trust somebody and you believe them, right? Was she being unfriendly? No. What was she doing? She had other ideas. She had other things happening. And she hadn't said we would go to McDonald's that Tuesday. Because we did it on the first two Tuesdays, doesn't mean we're going to do it every Tuesday forever. Did you know that? Yeah, probably. But Wendy didn't. See, when you start something, it becomes that's what you'll always do. And it's really hard to kind of switch that. People don't say we're going to do that today, we might not do it tomorrow. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you because they already know it. But you can almost guarantee if you know it, I won't. It's a bit like that. That makes sense? Yeah. Interesting that information is laid down so differently in the world of autism. As chemicals flow in and between synapses, information is exchanged. Synapse is just a word for a gap, if you like, between where one nerve finishes and another begins. There's like a puddle in the middle. And if you think of the information, remember we mentioned electrical telephone wires we mentioned before, yeah? And messages coming. So it's a bit like that in the brain. And you know, a message is coming and it kind of drops off into this chemical compound in the synapse. And this material is made up of something that will conduct, it will send the message on. So what happens to electricity if it hits a... Do you understand what a welly boot is? A Wellington boot? Or rubber boots?
Yeah,
galoshes. So what happens to electricity if it runs into a pair of galoshes or a galosh or something rubber? It stops. Why? Because it's not a conductor, yeah. What happens if an electrical current hits a wooden spoon? It stops because wood isn't a conductor. And it's a bit like that in autism. If you don't have the array of memory, if you don't have the differing connections, it's like they're stumped. It stops here. That understanding that I have, if it's all emotions, will stop here. That understanding that I have, if it's all of feeling, thinking, sensory, whatever the issue is, will stop here. They're not travelling on and connecting in the same way as in typical development. So you're trying your best to explain something to me, and it's almost like I'll hear the beginning or the ending, and the middle drops out of the sentence you're giving me. Or I'll hear the middle, and the beginning and the ending drop out. I'm not putting together the overall picture in the same way that you are. I'm not accessing that information. I'm building the understanding that you're trying to impart to me, because my brain just isn't working that way. This is brain, you've got motor neurons or nerves that work towards physical activity or keeping your heart pumping, that kind of thing. And you've got hearts and a whole system just devoted to sensory stuff. And the two talk to each other in typical development. And it talks to each other in autistic development as well. But it's the multitasking nerves or the neurons that branch between both that just are working differently in autism. This is a part of a poster I took a picture of. I don't know if anybody's heard of Lucy Jane Miller. Anybody heard of Lucy? She's somebody that, I think it's Dallas. she wrote the book called Sensational Kids. Has anybody heard that one? Anyway, she's just an amazing lady. I really liked the work she was doing. And they did some work with some young people, and what you see here, you can almost see a flat line. And this was of a child that was doing lots of different things in a pit of coloured balls, lots of activity, and the parent was swinging down and kind of tickling and going back and coming forward and tickling again. This kid was laughing. But you still had just single sense. Whereas in typical kids, we had a lot of multi-sense activity. So it's like one sense is dominating, and multi-sense, multitasking, things that connect were not happening as well. It was very, very interesting. I think that these trees, I know if you've heard me before, you've probably seen these lots of times, but these trees kind of illustrate what I'm trying to say. In autism, you've got interest, passion, that almost takes over. Highly focused interests take precedence. And that's where our attention is. It's so much so that you'll notice within the foliage of that tree, there's no other space, no place for other. Whereas in, the generic population, in typical development, you've got so many branches. Attention is multiply diffuse. Interests are shared. Sensories, systems are sharing information. Whenever you divide something, this happens with any equation, you make more. So if this was that chocolate cake I talked about, this is, so you've got to do pretend, yeah?
Yes.
Chocolate cake, and I want to share it with you. Just giving it away. What do I have to do? Cut it in half. So you get some, and I do too. So by cutting my cake in half, am I making more cake? No. Say no, thank you. Relief. I don't have more cake, but will it go further? Yes, absolutely. So it's a bit like that. Attention goes further, it travels across different planes, connects different understandings if you're typically developing. And if you're typically developing, you could almost say that by default you're designed for multitasking. You're designed to do several things at once. But in autism we're not. Which design is superior? Neither. I don't believe either are, but they are very different. Hence the autistic diff ability of being differently able. If you're designed like this, you're actually designed to be able to focus and do stuff with what you're focused on and become really good at. If you're designed like this, I could be naughty and say jack of all trades and master of none, but I'm not meant to. I could say that, you're a bit shallow. I'm not meant to say that either. Stretched? Who feels stretched sometimes? Yeah, all of us. You're all over the place, but there are places for you to thrive and to fit in and to belong, and social is often one of those. Social is something I'm not quite so good at. I'm better than I used to be, but I'm not quite so good at because it's not really something I'm designed. If you understand and appreciate some of these basics, how our brains work, then we're part of the way there in understanding how to support learning in autism spectrum. The other part, obviously, we need is the motivation and practical know-how so we can put it all together. We need the right tools. The tools for you that you use in communicating and understanding the world, the tools that I use are going to be different because we're made differently. So please, I know that again I'm talking to the converted, please accept my difference. Stop trying to change me. Who wants somebody to change them? Put your hand up if you want someone to change you. Scary. Some of you might. No, nobody. That's amazing. Okay, well I'm very pleased to hear it. Because it's one of the hardest things. Everywhere you go, even magazines for 8-year-olds are airbrushed. The pictures on the front cover of this glossy little kid who's perfect in every way. Have you seen them? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do typical 8-year-olds do? Look up to this 8-year-old on the comic I want to be like them. So we've got 8-year-olds who are anorexic. We've got 8-year-olds who are bulimic. 8-year-olds living with eating disorders because whatever. Is that right? No, absolutely not. 8-year-olds you should never have to worry about that if you're 8. You should be just having fun. So we need an appropriate medium that will facilitate interest if we're working in autism. We need accessible language in a form that actually caters for interest. And we need to use the strengths of that young person motivated by interest. Interest, I believe, is the centre for everything that we're doing in the world of autism. Do you all learn better if you're interested?
Yes.
Absolutely. This is not new. It's just that you have access to external interest. Who will do something like, perhaps you'll watch a TV program or go to the cinema and watch a movie. Not necessarily your choice, but you'll go because your partner's going or your best friend's going. Somebody else. That's really hard in autism when you have a sensory system that's not actually taking on board easily what's happening to another. Is that right? So we're motivated much more by internal stuff. And if therefore you join our interest, it's an awful lot easier. You're creating a pathway for me to be able to join you. And I know most of you, if you're families, will want to join your kids, and you're just fed up with them always going on about the same thing. But if you actually join us in that one thing, we're more likely to join you, and that means that one thing can become 2, and then that becomes 3, that becomes 4, and so on. And you're actually able to help us learn and join up systems in ways that we're not doing intuitively. Access the world we all live in. Don't keep me restrained in mind. Using accessible language, which might mean sometimes signing, pictures, objects, visual timetables, etc. But if you use something like Makaton, do you know what Makaton is? If you use signing, we have different signs in different cultures, but do you know what this one means? In Australia, this means finished. Okay? And in England, if you want to use the bathroom, what do they do? Oh, they do this. Now, if I stand, I'm in a supermarket and I've just